Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday Coffee Chat, where all of your property needs are met. So, property strategies and how they can help streamline your journey. Very important, right? Property is a very big space. The property market is very big. The different strategies will help you align to your goal as quickly as possible. So, we are going to be discussing that today. First and foremost, as the war always goes on, tell me where you were seeing me from. Joburg, Cape Town, Bloemfontein, Kenya. We had a Kenya at some point. Let me know where you're watching us from. I feel like I'm gonna be, a little shady and say, since I am in Joburg as I am doing this and I am part of the coffee chat, the first person on the coffee chat is myself. And as such, Joburg has a leg up because we can. And Eric comes in swinging with Cape Town, and I knew that somebody from Cape Town was going to do that, which is why I'm like, technically, if we're going to be functioning on technicalities, Joburg wins because I'm currently in Joburg. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to be literally reading all of your comments. Carrie Lee from this iPad here, so do not despair. That's why I have it up, because I'm trying to see where you guys are hitting me up from. So Carrie Lee, where are you from? Let me know in the chat box where you guys are watching me from, and I'm going to let you know off the bat. We have an amazing show. We literally have so many guests today. Amazing, so I love the arts. So I want to say thespians of the property world, and those who understand arts understand that means these people are the big guns. They have been doing property for years, and they specialize in these sectors. And as such, it's an all-round overview of what exactly this different strategies will offer you. So we're going to be talking about student accommodation. We're going to be talking about multi-lets, buy-to-lets, Airbnbs, even developments. But there's something actually very interesting. A lovely gentleman by the name of Tiaan Rossouw is going to be discussing called spec houses. I only heard about that 5 minutes ago. So if me as the host is already learning something, clearly today is going to be a jam-packed show for you. So we have Debbie from Gansbaai. I'm going to throw it out there and say Western Cape, I assume. It has like a very Western Cape name, if not Northern Cape. Just let me know where you are going to be seeing me from. So let us talk about our events. We are going to have a pretty busy June. It's going to be Youth Month, and as you know, the Sapin Head, which is Daniel Kazadi, is going to be having an event for Youth Month. However, we're also going to be having a cash flow game. So for those of you who don't know, if you've ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is usually where everybody's property journey starts, he has a game called Cash Flow, and it's about financial literacy and teaching individuals how to be financially literate and how to make quick and fast decisions about it. Okay, so we have Luke, we have Nicholas, and then Debbie, please let me know where's Gansbaai, where is that? But that's going to be happening this Friday in Edenvale, so you can actually just book your tickets on our website. After that, we have the big one on the 17th and 18th of June, and that is the 2-day wealth builder. Literally, it's straight to the point. It is a practical property investing. The same things we're going to be discussing today in terms of the different array of strategies. Yes, Gansbaai is in Western Cape. Awesome. The different strategies, and how they work, that's what we're going to be having to unpack properly on the 2-day workshop, because we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of each and every single property journey there is. But subsequently, as you guys know, you can enter for Investor of the Year award. And I'm petty. I will start calling you out by name because I know you have deals and I know you have the capacity. So why are you guys not entering Investor of the Year award? So now that we're done with our events, I'm still trying to understand where everybody is from. So cheers, let me know in the chat box. Are you from Cape Town? Are you from Bloemfontein? Are you from Gansbaai in the Western Cape? It sounds like a place that probably is really windy, but has amazing views, because I used to live in Cape Town for a few years, and I know it has exquisite views. But yeah, just let me know where you guys are from. Cape Town, Johannesburg, Bloemfontein. Where is it that you guys are from? Ladies and gentlemen, I told you earlier that we have amazing guests today, and these individuals are the ones that are seasoned in the property space and the particular, areas of expertise that they have. We have Andile, who's talking to us from Johannesburg. So I'm going to be introducing these people in a few minutes, but I still want to know where you guys are from, and also because I brought you guests upon guests upon guests, I want you guys to give me all of your questions in the chat box. So we're going to be asking them a pretty simple question, which is standard. What are the three pros and cons about your particular strategy? And what is the one tip that they can give you slash us? Like I said, I only found out what a spec development is 5 minutes ago. And then after that, I want you guys to ask in the chat box. Okay, literally put all of your questions. We'll make sure they get answered in the chat box. We have Chadley, who is from Cape Town, Mitchell's Play. That is awesome. Jerry from Kenya. I knew we had a Kenya. But yeah, so in the chat box, let me know what the questions are. However, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give these phenomenal entrepreneurs and property investors a chance to introduce themselves. However, I'm just going to say, can you please give me a huge shout out, just like little clap emojis in the chat box? Please help me welcome Bevin Thomas, Angelique Naude, Tiaan Rossouw, and Bruce Lee. There is Angelique, and then we have Bruce. And then we have Tiaan, and Bevin is going to be joining us just a little bit later. He did send me a message advising that he is going to be running a little bit late. However, lady and gentlemen, how are you this afternoon?
Thanks for the intro and thanks for having us, Khali. Doing well today.
Fantastic.
Good morning, Khali. Thank you for this opportunity to interact with you guys.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to shoot it out the way. So, Bruce, you are an expert in Airbnbs. Tiaan, you do multi-lets and the new word I learned that I'm going to be using forever, spec developments. Angelique, you are seasoned in buy-to-lets and multi-lets. And later on, ladies and gentlemen, when Bevin joins us, he's going to be our expert for student accommodation. So we'll start with ladies because I rarely get ladies here. Angelique, what would you say are the three pros and cons when it comes to buy-to-lets, and what is the one tip you would have?
Morning. Thank you. The one time I didn't want to be the first. Khali, I think it's the journey that you travel on. I'd like to believe in the journey I'm on at the moment. I fell into property, and most people on the journey I'm in, you would have fallen into property. But I think it's pretty amazing that now you can actually choose it and select it and go out and hunt for it. It's not something you fall into. And the strategy I fell in love with together with Rian is buy-to-let. He was actually the one that introduced me to it with my very first property I purchased. So that was an amazing learning curve. And yeah, there's lots of pros and cons to buy-to-let, more than three.
Okay, just give us the three. We can't give them everything. They tune in, but they also need to be part of our workshop to honestly get and unpack everything. So let's hear what are the three pros.
Absolutely. I think everybody on the panel here, one of the pros and one of the things that we do focus on, obviously, is the income. And different strategies create different incomes. And for the buy-to-let, that's the passive income. Not 100% passive. You do need to get involved into the properties at some point. But I think the future income, the passive future income, that really it keeps the wheels rolling. It allows you to live your lifestyle as Bruce's background has got there, and then also do future investments. So buy-to-let is definitely that's one of the big pros to it. And another pro, which is a little bit untraditional on a platform like this, but I think it's to create one of two things, and that is a happy home for someone. I think living in South Africa, there's a lot of homes that are not happy. And if you're able to create a buy-to-let property where you can give someone a space that he can call home and that you look after that property for them. I think that is a massive win. And in that process of looking after that property, you also employment, because together with the strategy, you're also getting in your electricians, your plumbers, and that way you're actually stimulating the economy by just purchasing a property and letting it out to somebody. So I think that, to me, is close to my heart, being a lady.
That's actually phenomenal. I had never really looked at it from that perspective, in terms of you, before anything, you're providing a home. But then, as always, there are cons, because when you work with people, it gets a bit extra. What would you say the cons of buy-to-let are?
Continued communication. People can be fickle, tenants can be full of we say in Afrikaans, draadwerk. And you need to practice a little bit of emotional intelligence. I think that's a massive, massive thing you need to have as a landlord, property investor, is just have a little bit of EQ and know how to deal with people. And I think, if you're investing in a property and want to create a home for somebody, you want somebody in there that you can actually call your business partner. So the cons is you do require to have quite a bit of communication. Setting up the viewings, getting the properties, purchasing of the properties, negotiation. So there's a lot of communication that goes on. And I think, that's something you don't just, you need to attend, you need to attend webinars, you ask difficult questions, and you need to understand, am I that individual that can actually do that? So from a cons point of view, lots of communication. And I think one of the cons that we're sitting with in end of 22, beginning of 23, it is starting to change, is the vacancy rate. Mm-hmm. That was quite a big con, and portfolio is not enough to be able to carry that. That can be quite painful, and we all know it's not a seller's market right now. So that's some of the cons that you need to be aware of. And then, of course, the interest rate, that's also caught us all off guard, regardless of your strategy. So, yeah, that's just a very short, deep-end question, answers.
Okay, so what I got from that is, firstly, if you're asocial, it's not going to work. You actually have to talk to people and actually communicate. However, I see we already have a question for you, Angelique, however, but we'll get back to that. We're going to go right over next to Mr. Holiday himself. I'm very envious. I don't even know where you are, but it looks amazing. Bruce, sir, how are you?
Fine, thanks, and Khali.
I'm fantastic. So what would you say are the key pros in terms of Airbnb?
So for Airbnb, the 3 pros that we have is that your barriers to entry are actually really minimal, depending on where you choose to be and what type of apartment you look for. So I've mentioned this on a previous chat before, that if you actually look for a place that's already furnished, all you're really looking at then is your deposits, and you're ready to go. So really quick to turn around. The second nice thing is that the income that you can generate off of Airbnb can be quite substantial, depending on how you've done your research and where that unit is. So once again, a really, really nice strategy to use for cash flow purposes. Obviously not for long-term wealth creation, but what you do with that income is really up to you. And that could even get you some nice vacations, like the screensaver you see here in my background. And then I think one of the other pros that you get is similar to one that Angelique has already mentioned, whereby you're actually creating an experience for somebody, a nice vacation that they perhaps otherwise might not have been able to go on. And you can create different experiences for them in terms of maybe a little surprise outing, a decoration for a special event they're having, or something like that. So the interaction with the guests is something that's really nice as well. So yeah, some nice pros there to actually being an Airbnb host.
Okay, that's interesting. I find it quite fascinating when you're saying naturally for long term it is a bit, on the thin side, but in terms of cash flow, that is consistent enough for you at the very least to gain enough capital. Let's say, to go over to Angelique's strategy, like buy-to-let. we don't know. However, what I would like to know then is similar to if there's a lot of good, there's gotta be some bad. So then what would be the cons of Airbnb?
Most definitely. And this is probably one of my most favorite parts. I mean, pros are something that's always really easy to sell. I mean, we know what the nice parts are, but no one ever wants to talk about the bad parts. So the cons to having an Airbnb is that, number one, if you do not do your homework correctly, run your numbers and educate yourself properly in the Airbnb space, things could go terribly wrong for you financially. Right, so that is one of the cons. So besides for that, not all of your guests are fantastic guests. And similar to what Angelique has said, you are constantly going to have to communicate. You're going to have to deal with bad guests. These are real things that happen. So something that you should always make sure you have ready is insurance or processes in place to actually do your claims, right? And I think that's one of the third cons is probably, so I've spoken already about the numbers, and then also about the guests, and probably also just Airbnb can be really administratively intensive as well. It's important to put your processes, controls, and strategies in place to minimize the amount of effort that you actually have to put into that as well. Communicating with guests, setting up cleaners, contractors when something goes wrong, keeping guests happy, check-ins, all of that stuff can be administratively intensive if you try to do it without any sort of tools or automation.
Okay. So that actually is something that's food for thought. If you think you're going to be going into the Airbnb space, one, you need a proper system to make it streamlined, and also you need to understand that you have to run your numbers quite thoroughly before you start investing in this, and then it doesn't work out. And so what would the one tip be?
So I think my one tip would be that, yes, a lot of us as property investors do go into Airbnb for the cash flow, but I absolutely believe that if you constantly commit to providing a positive, enjoyable stay to your guests, you will continue to get good rankings, good occupancies, and in turn still make good cash flow. So my tip to everybody that's listening is be a good host and deliver exceptional service and experiences, and you will reap the rewards of your consistency.
Fantastic. Okay, so guys, if you have any questions regarding Airbnb, please put them in the chat box. Next up is Bevin. Hello, sir. You just joined us. I did mark you present, in the beginning.
Thanks,
But
Bevin, being a bit late, but
you, similarly to Bruce, are in a strategy that most people don't easily know. I think at the very least, people understand with Angelique in terms of a buy-to-let. People have had cottages, and there's a certain surface level of understanding, where student accommodation is completely different, baby. So what would you then say? What are the 3 pros when it comes to student accommodation?
Awesome. So maybe I'll start by just touching on Angelique talking about that interaction with student or with your tenants, because it's something that you need to analyze who you are before you jump into student accommodation, and really understand that you're becoming a parent in essence. So it's worth knowing that you're not going to be a silent investor when you're doing student accommodation. So there's pros to it. Some people really thrive on that idea of being involved, helping to mold these young people's lives. So I think there's huge positive impact that you can have on these young people as they're coming up, they then starting their new lives. So that for me is something to really bear in mind. If you're going to get into student accommodation, go into it with the mindset of, hey, I'm doing this to improve someone's lives, to give value, to give back. So there needs to be some of that in your mindset. And I think what unfortunately ends up happening is a lot of people go, hey, there's great yields in student accommodation, so there's massive profit in the rental, and that is, so that's a big positive when it comes to student accommodation. But it's and the reason for that is, if you look at a multi-let property, you look at a small room that you're renting, you can maybe get about 1,800 for a room, 2,000 Rand. Whereas the positive in student accommodation is you can generally take that one room and you can either, if the size is correct and you're following the legislation, if it's above 7 square meters for a single student. But the positive is if you're now in a room that's now 14, 15 square meters, you can then go and throw 2 beds into that unit and double your income. So on a multi-let, you would only have 1 young professional in that space. The student accommodation, you're now doubling that side of it. And the last positive I want to touch on is if we look at the stuff that's happening in the Airbnb space that Bruce is talking about, a lot of this sort of noise is happening around legislation changing and so on. And I think that does make some people nervous when it comes to the short-term letting. Whereas in student accommodation, we all know that if they take away NSFAS and accommodation and the university space, that the students are going to burn down the universities. So to me, that becomes a huge positive because it means that is there to stay for the long term. So long term, we know at least the next 5 years, there's going to be no interruption to student accommodation. And if not 10 years, South Africa being third world, we've got a long way to go before online studies will happen in the rural area, etc. So those are my main positives there.
Okay, that was a little dark. However, I can appreciate the assurance of knowing my tenants, by fire, by force, will always be my tenants. That is pretty awesome, Bevin. But again, you did say these are young minds. These are people who are now like away from their parents for the first time in their lives. So a lot of them, anarchy is bound to happen. What are the cons of student accommodation?
There's a lot of them, but I think I'll narrow them down a bit. I'll move away from the dark side of things. So I think the one to bear in mind, when you're doing a multi-let property, you've got spaces that can be turned over. In student accommodation, the biggest fear that I always have is that at the beginning of the semester, the beginning of the year, I don't fill all my beds. And the unfortunate side of that is it's very, very difficult to fill a vacancy in the middle of the year. So if you had someone who drops out of university in the first couple of months, they're not going to be there going forward. So as a result, you can't just pick up another tenant and put them into that bed. Whereas in the residential space, there's people always looking for accommodation. In the student accommodation space, it becomes a bit more difficult to fill those. So that's one major negative that I always tell people to be very confident about your numbers. Make sure you've got enough of a buffer in your vacancies. And it also makes it important to fill your beds and put all your effort in at the beginning of the year. Another negative for me, and we touched on that, is the fact that you're dealing with these young minds. And so as a result, you have to bear in mind that they're not mature adults. This is often the first time that they've ever left home. So never mind on a holiday or anything. This is the first time that they're stepping out and they're getting freedom. So a big negative about that is what happens with the impact to the neighbors. So you really have to understand that when it comes to a student, you're responsible for everything. Okay, so it means you're responsible for checking that the place is clean. You're responsible for the gardens. You're responsible for the electricity, the water, everything that comes with that. Versus what you would be doing in a residential space, you can give a lot of that responsibility to your tenant. And then maybe my last thing to touch on is a lot of landlords come into the space with almost a slumlord mentality where they want to get as many beds in as possible and make as much money as possible. So it's very important to understand the legislation and deal with your town planner, because if the municipality comes back to you and says you're operating the student accommodation illegally, they will penalize you. And whether that means they force you to close down, whether they force you to take down renovations that you've done. And the big one that normally happens is they'll give you penalty rates. So where your rates are normally 2,000 Rand a month, they'll push that up to 10,000, 20,000 Rand a month. And that kind of penalty is not easy to come back from. Mm-hmm. So that kind of covers most of my negatives, but there are a lot more.
Okay, let's not scare them out of student accommodation. So what would you then say is the one tip you have for, somebody that wants to get into student accommodation?
So I'll come back to the fact that you need to understand that it is this parenting role that you're going to undertake. So my pro tip is, if you're not the kind of person who wants to be really involved in grooming those students and grooming them into better humans, better adults in the future, is what you're going to focus on is, how do I outsource that to a managing company? And again, like this, for me, it's finding the right management company, not a normal residential management company. You need someone who specializes in student accommodation. And with that, it's someone who's going to have what we would almost call a house mother on the property,
Yes.
who's going to be that one who is present on the property 24/7, making sure that if there's any health issues with the kids, someone's sick, there's someone who's going to care for them. If there's any disruption, noise, etc., they're going to help with that. And then maybe I'll slide in another pro tip is the idea of your utilities management. What we've done is we've put prepaid electricity meters into the students' individual bedrooms, because what happens is that stops them from putting a heater in to their bedroom in the middle of winter, because they know they're responsible for the electricity for that room. And the other side to it is, when they leave the room, 99% of students don't care about turning the lights off. But if they're responsible for the electricity for their room, they turn that light off. And it's good to remember, because you don't have access to their room to go and turn off the lights like you do for your kids at home. So those are the two major pro tips I have there.
That is actually a really great tip in terms of saying it. It's like this weird middle ground where you have to afford them, the certain privileges and luxuries of a tenant, but then you also have to, like you said, have a house mother or like a adoptive uncle approach to it, right? Because there's still, wet behind the ears, and there's a lot of lackluster things that, some of these are like 17. If you think about it, last year you were asking permission to go to the bathroom, and now we expect you to just kind of find your way. However, we are getting questions, and it's awesome. So please put all of your questions. I see already we have an Airbnb question, we have a buy-to-let question. Put all your questions in the chat box, because our last guest speaker today is going to be Tiaan. And Tiaan does something that I learned 15 minutes ago called spec developments. And he also does multi-lets. So Tiaan, out the gate, let's talk. What is that?
Hi, Khali. Thank you for having me here. First of all, I just hope you can hear me properly, because my neighbors just found his chainsaw. The dogs are barking, connection's bad, everything is going wrong now. So just to put your mind at ease, spec build is actually just another word. It's speculative building. When you build a property and basically sell it. That is where we started off. And then from there, we moved into build to let. So it's similar to buy to let, but you just build your own properties and then let it out.
Okay, that was anticlimactic. I hyped it up so much. I thought it was like something super cool. Nonetheless, in terms of your expertise in spec builds or spec developments and also multi-lets, what would your 3 pros be about that?
Okay, if I have to touch on, obviously, like the other people that's on here, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. But if I had to nail it down to a couple, when you are the developer or the builder of your property, obviously you from the get-go, you've got like a 20 or 30% equity in that property, because you're building it at cost, and that is not when you employ a builder. It's when you're building it yourself. When you've got this property that you're letting out and not selling, you also don't have any maintenance for like the first 5 or 7 years. Obviously, everything is new, everything is working. There's nothing wrong with the property, and that is something that's very different on my multi-lets. They would generally tell you to provision around 8 to 10% of your monthly income to your maintenance, but I found that's more true to the 15 to 20% mark. So you spend a lot of money on your multi-lets on maintenance from the get-go, because usually it's older properties. Something else that I actually forgot to mention when you are your own builder of your property, you've got that profit or that equity in your property. So you can it just opens up the space for you to either sell it at a profit or you can refinance the property. When you refinance the property, you obviously get that profit. You get that back, but there's no tax payable on that because it's a refinance. You didn't sell the property for a profit. And then also another thing that I quite like when you build 5 properties in the same portfolio, there's an act called, you all know about it, it's the section 13.6. It's according to the Income Act, and that states that you can roughly get back 55% or write off 55% of the amount of what your building is worth over 20 years. So that is quite a significant tax break that you get if you're able to build 5 of your own properties and then rent it out.
Okay, that's actually very interesting because, like we mentioned in the first, that especially if it's a spec build or a build to let, out the gate, like you mentioned, first 5 to 7 years there is no maintenance because everything is brand spanking new. So you could also put that into account in terms of the cost of how much it costs to build versus how much you're saving. But then in that same breath, there are cons. The first one I can think of is you're paying to build from scratch. So what would you then say are cons to that?
Yeah, obviously you're paying to build from scratch, but like I mentioned, if you don't employ a builder and you're doing it yourself, you do have that buffer that you're actually making when you're not selling the property. But
yeah, 80% of us don't know how to build ourselves.
Yeah, that is actually one of my cons is the learning curve of that. You've got to have a great power team. You have to have a good builder, a good electrician, and all of them have to come in at a good price, do it quickly and do it properly. So to get that team together is very difficult. It takes years to perfect that, and at times like COVID, some of your best people pass away, and then you have to start searching for new people, and that's really a big headache. Yeah, well, that was the first point that I wanted to touch on. The second one is your yields aren't as great as the student accommodation or the multi-lets. You're looking at more or less 10 to 12% yield, whereby in the multi-lets or the student accommodation, you're looking 15%, sometimes 20% plus. So that is also a con of the build to let. And then also it's a bit of a high risk, I would say, because if you've got, say, for instance, 4 or 5 people in that multi-let and one of them it's a delinquent tenant or they move out, you still got 3 or 4 people that pays you, so you can pay your bond. Whereby if you've got a single family house and you only got that one guy in there, if he goes delinquent or moves out, you've got no income, and then you still have to service that bond.
Okay. So we've opened it back to the chat box in terms of the questions that we have. But before I get that, please put your questions in the chat box. We already have, I think, one for Angelique, Bruce, and Bevin. So yours will be coming just shortly. I want to mention our events that are going to be happening. The big one, like I said, is the Practical Property Investing. It is our Wealth Builder workshop that's going to be happening on the 17th and 18th. Yes, 2 days, because it's a lot of information. We want to give you enough time to absorb, to digest, and properly unpack it. That's going to be on the 17th and the 18th of June. Also, we're going to be having a cash flow night that's happening on the 9th of June in Edenvale at our head offices. And like I told you, if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like most of us in terms of starting your property journey, you would know that he has a game teaching financial literacy. So you can also book tickets for that. So as we get back to it, this one is going to be for Angelique. This is from Luke Pather. He wants to know, how much experience do you need in property management before your buy-to-let properties become passive in nature?
Okay, so my experience came out of the deep end.
0 to 100 real quick.
Sorry, again, from the era where I fell into property and didn't, study for it. I did, what do you call it, life lessons. So, look, I've been doing it now for 20 years. Back in the day when SAPN didn't exist, believe it or not. No, for sure. We didn't have the SAPNs. We're very, very privileged to have the Property Academy and SAPN around now, because myself and Riaan, we didn't have that. So I lived in my first rental. We had some burglaries. I bought a second property to move to. And then all of a sudden I sat with 2 properties that I wasn't living in. So that's how I got into property. I think back in the day we had the Robert Kiyosakis of the world. They were the ones that were pioneering a passive income. So we attended a lot of those online courses, read the books, and so there was some knowledge out there, but not strong enough within South Africa. And then again, of course, now we've got SAPN. So there are modules that you can attend. A lot of properties, a lot of companies do present that now. Just to make sure I'm answering this correctly. Become passive in nature. It's in the numbers. And when I say numbers, the more properties you have a better ability to automate certain processes, and then remove yourself potentially from areas that are time consuming. For example, I've recently, since I'm now on my own in this journey, I've recently employed a gentleman that does all my viewings. And I mean, that is at least 50% of my time when it comes to advertising a property, for example. So that's something I can do passively, not get involved hugely, and still secure, good quality tenants. Luke, you've got SAPN to help you out there.
I think to sum it up would be, one, do your numbers properly, and then also get the right education. But then you can now outsource a lot of the work, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
You can have a property manager, you can streamline it, so you don't have to hold in every single thing.
If I can say something else,
yes.
I think the tip would be, in terms of, get as much knowledge-based interfaces as possible as you can. Just absorb, even if it's something that's being repeated, just keep absorbing it, because what happens, you automatically start thinking property. When you're faced with a situation, you automatically go into property mode without even realizing it. But I think also do personal introspective work in terms of identifying what is your strength. Because once you know what your strength is, you know what strategy to go for. My strength is not development. I will definitely not do development. I don't have the mindset for it. It's not my strength. It's something I won't do. But I don't mind teaming up with, for example, Tiaan, and saying, well, let's do a spec project together, and learning through Tiaan. But that's not my strength, so that's not my strategy. So I think that's quite critical to identify right off the bat before you put any money down on the table.
Yes, that is actually very, very, very true. So in terms of Bruce, we have another question from Luke, and he wants to know, which areas do you think have been slept on in SA? And I am assuming it's for Airbnb.
It's a very interesting question. So, and the thing that makes it more interesting, though, is that I recently embarked on a project myself to look into this sort of information, because we all know everyone's all about coastal and holiday destinations. However, any sort of apartment or or stay that you can offer people close to any sort of activity, or any sort of halfway travel between destinations that are far away, are very good ideas, and people easily overlook them. But those can have very high occupancy and can be very profitable.
Okay. As we keep it rolling, we have Leonardo, who wants to know, hi, Bevin. When dealing with student accommodation, how much deposit are you typically charging, and are the leases set up to 12 months?
Awesome. So I'm going to take it back to that intake at the beginning of the year. That period, as I mentioned earlier, it's super important to fill your beds.
Mhm.
So I would often say that filling your beds is a higher priority for you because of the income that you're going to have for the entire year. So filling your bed is a higher priority than trying to push for a high deposit. So any form of deposit that you can get from your students, just to give them that psychological switch to say, hey, if I mess around, they've got some of my money that they're going to then use towards fixing this or so. So I need to be careful. So we generally sit at about like a 2,000 on average, but there are a lot of occasions where we won't take a deposit at all because we're at that stage where we're trying to push to full beds. And you can understand, if we miss the 2,000 Rand deposit and we have an empty bed for the whole year, that's going to cost us 100 times more than what that empty bed is going to be. So it's weighing that sort of thing up. That's important. And then, so I see the other side is around how long your leases are. Generally, student accommodation leases are for the academic year. So that's generally a 10-month period. However, what I do suggest you look at is what institution are you providing students or providing beds for? So if you're doing the UCTs, that's sort of higher income university, you can go a lot more sort of exclusive in the accommodation that you do. In that case, what you can do is, because you're almost becoming the same product that's given to a young professional, and you're looking at the entire journey for your student. So at that top end where it's a little bit more exclusive, you can push them to say, listen, secure this unit so you have it for your whole full-year degree, and then you push them into a 12-month lease. When you start looking at the bottom end where you're looking at NSFAS will only pay you for the 10 months. So if your lease is with NSFAS, that's what they budgeted, that's what you're going to receive. But on the back end of it, when you get to the end of the year, you're now in November, you know you're not going to have tenants at the end of the year, you can then start looking at strategies around that vacant month of December, January. How do I make sure I optimize that? So a couple of tips around that is get your students, the first year students, to rebook before the end of the year to come back to you in January. And you can sometimes say, listen, we'll keep all your furniture or your belongings here, so you don't have to cart them all the way home. We'll keep them here and we'll charge you a nominal lease for that. Okay, so it's like a storage fee you'll do.
Yes.
And what we've done with one or two of our properties in Cape Town is we've gone and we've optimized those in December, January for Airbnb. So people who are coming down for a cheap spot to stay in, we really sort of focus on the fact this is a student accommodation. It's not a nice fancy Airbnb like Bruce is managing. It's very simple, a bed, and we charge a lower rate, but we fill that space. So it's kind of strategies that you're looking at like that to take advantage of those 2 months where you're not full.
No, that's actually quite an interesting strategy. And so now we have another question from Sam. I think I will direct it at Tiaan, but either one of you can hop on it. Sam is saying, hi guys, I have noticed that most coaches tend to steer their students away from buying into new developments. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, Khali, I think new developments it's basically never profitable if you look at it cash flow wise. What a lot of developers will do is they will incentivize you, and then for the first year you won't be charged any levies. So a lot of the times in their numbers they take the levies out, and in the small writing they've taken that out for a year. So it all looks good and well, but after that year when that kicks in, you're in the red or underwater with it. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think the only time that you would buy into a new development is when you want to take advantage of that Section 13(6). We've got a lot of a property, and you'd like to offset those profits that you make with those properties with the new development property that you buy.
Alrighty then. So as we close off, lady and gentlemen, what would be your parting words for individuals who want to enter the property space, or even are already in the property space and want to switch strategies? Maybe it's a person who had been flipping a few times, and as we know, currently in the market, it's not the best of strategies, and maybe they want to go into buy-to-lets or multi-lets. So from each one of you, what would your parting words be to those people? Angelique, we'll start with you. Why are you looking at me smiling?
Khali, I think it goes back to just, okay, so if you've not been into property, identify your strategy, and maybe shadow one of the investors that are on the SAP network, put the message out there and say, look, I want to know more about this. Can I follow you for a day? Because the WhatsApp groups are quite good in terms of just getting the gist of the conversation. And I think if you're already in property, I would like to think everybody here has tried a couple of strategies and then obviously fell into the one that resonates with them the best. Bruce, I'd love to go into Airbnb. I just don't have enough knowledge. So I need to go on the course and also get my picture of my destination holiday on the behind me.
Mm-hmm.
My tip would be definitely, even though I'm just in buy-to-let and multi-lets, is to try and diversify your investment. I feel the climate that we're in South Africa at the moment is too many eggs in the same basket. It does make me a little bit concerned. We have a lot of loose ends within South Africa, and I don't even need to mention all the parastatal issues we've got. But it is something I'm looking at. So I don't know enough about diversifying and investing in other countries and other strategies. If you've got 100 Rand, you could, Khali, as well with Daniel, you set up a consortium or a stokvel for that matter. But yeah, my takeaway would be look at diversifying. Identify what your strategy is within South Africa and make sure it lines up with your future plans, and then just make sure that you have some level of diversification, because if something breaks here, it's going to break quite badly. Sorry for the doom and gloom.
No, it's perfectly fine. This is why they joined us, is to be realist and be quite real in terms of what we are saying to them. Bruce, what would your parting words be to an individual who's either entering the property space and doesn't know which strategy, or is currently in it and wants to switch?
So short and sweet for me, Khali. Get educated. Ensure that your numbers are right. Optimize and make sure that you have the correct processes for automation and consistency.
Mm-hmm.
If you have those, you should have a winning recipe.
There we go. Short and sweet from Bruce. Bevin, what are your parting words?
My perspective on property is it's a wealth generating tool. And for me, it's a generational wealth generating tool. So for me, my focus is always on the fact that I'm not sprinting in this. It's a marathon for me. So every deal needs to incrementally build me towards that goal, which is generational wealth. Mm-hmm. So I really do suggest to people, don't come into this wanting to get rich quickly, because it's not about getting rich, it's about getting wealthy. So that easy come is very easy go. Mm-hmm. So focus on that. How do I incrementally build these blocks to get to that long-term journey? Mm-hmm. So wealth building is my focus.
Wealth building. So pick whatever strategy you feel will get you there in the most secure way in terms of wealth generation. I actually like that. Yeah. And lastly, Tiaan, but not least, what would your parting words be?
I think I'd like to touch on Bruce and Angelique's points, and then just put a little bit of my own in there. I definitely think that education is very important. You can't embark on any property deal or anything if you don't have the proper education. I think when you start off though, to diversify might be a little bit of an issue. I had that before with myself, or that's my experience, that I educated myself in so many areas in property, and I went into so many deals and so many options and strategies that you get overwhelmed. So you have to look at everything, get yourself educated, and then focus on one thing that you like and be an expert in it, get into it, and once you feel that you've grown out of it, then maybe look at something else to diversify.
Very interesting, guys. So firstly, I want to just say thank you so much for joining me on this Monday coffee chat, and thank you to every single person. I saw somebody here from Belgium. Yes, Yaku. You get a shout out just because you're from Belgium. Not from, but currently are in Belgium. However, I want to say thank you guys for joining us. You know, it is every single Monday, 1 o'clock. I have amazing guests such as the ones here who just give you insight into property and all the things that you should roughly know. And hopefully we give an input, a little bit of something. So when you leave here, you know that at least I learned something from Angelique, Bruce, Bevin, and Tiaan. But from me to you, see you next week.